Excuse me. I heard it so quietly I almost thought it was someone talking to themselves. But when I turned around, there was this older woman, short gray hair, little wireframe glasses, leaning in toward me. The person behind you, she whispered. They've been following you. Every aisle. My stomach tightened. I looked back casually, like I was just checking the line. And sure enough, 3 people behind us stood. A tall guy with dark hair, staring down at his phone. Blue jacket. Just like she said. I asked if she was sure. She nodded, eyes wide, and told me she'd watched him trail behind me from electronics, to home goods, and then to the book aisle. Never getting too close. Never wandering off. I thanked her, even though my heart was thudding like I'd just run a mile. I tried to look normal, breathing slow, smiling at the cashier, while scanning around for any store security. Nothing. At checkout, I paid fast. The guy in the blue jacket stayed in line, not even looking at me anymore. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe he was just another shopper. But my nerves wouldn't let it go. I power walked to my car, threw the bags into the trunk, and got out of that parking lot faster than I ever have in my life. Every stoplight, I checked my mirrors. No blue jacket. No suspicious car behind me. Just me being dramatic, or so I told myself. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, my nerves had settled into this tired shakiness. I grabbed the basics, milk, eggs, bread, and left everything else in the back. I just wanted to be home. Right as I unlocked the door, my phone rang. Nathaniel. My ex from college. The one I hadn't heard a single word from in 3 years. Curiosity beat out common sense, and I picked up. His voice sounded tense, almost shaky. He told me he needed to talk, that it was important, and asked if we could meet. I hesitated, obviously. After 3 years? But he sounded different. Serious. So I agreed. We set it for Wednesday. The park near the library. When Wednesday came, I got there 15 minutes early. It was overcast, cool, just enough breeze to make the fountain spray drift a little. I chose a bench close to the water, where people were walking their dogs and kids were feeding birds. Nathaniel showed up exactly at 2 o'clock. Sunglasses on, even though the sky was cloudy. He gave me this awkward hug, like he wasn't totally sure I'd let him. Then he thanked me, twice, for meeting. He said he'd been debating for weeks about how to approach me. I raised an eyebrow and said texting would have been a decent start. He laughed nervously and said he wasn't sure I'd respond. Then he took off the sunglasses, and everything changed. His voice got lower, and he said, I saw something at your sister's wedding. My stomach dropped. Anne's wedding was last month. It was beautiful. Emotional. Normal. Nothing about it needed to be revisited. I asked what he meant. And he told me he was there. At the wedding. I just stared at him. He wasn't invited. We hadn't spoken in 3 years. Why would he show up? He explained that his cousin Eugene is friends with Troy, my brother-in-law, and Eugene brought him as a +1. Random and weird, but okay. I asked why he never said hi. And that's when he glanced around like he was afraid someone might hear. I didn't say anything because I saw Sheila. I blinked. Who? Your mother. I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. Because that was impossible. Completely, horribly impossible. I told him my mom wasn't there. My mother was dead. She died in a car accident when I was 12. Nathaniel shook his head and said, no. I know what she looks like. I've seen the pictures. She was at table 8. My chest felt tight. Anger, confusion, everything at once. I stood up and told him he was being ridiculous. I said, my mother is dead. I went to her funeral. And then he asked the one question I will never forget. Did you see her body? I stared at him. He kept talking, calm, certain. Said it was a closed casket because of the accident. Said the woman looked at him. Recognized him. And then looked away. I grabbed my purse and walked off. I heard him calling after me, saying he wasn't lying, that he knew what he saw. But I left. I drove straight to my sister's house. I barely remember the drive, just gripping the wheel so hard my hands hurt. And answered the door in pajamas and messy hair, like she'd just woken up. I told her we needed to talk about mom. Her face drained of color. Completely. When I said Nathaniel claimed he saw her at the wedding, and poured herself a full glass of water with shaking hands. She said he must have been confused. I said the same thing, at first. But he seemed so sure. And sat down at the kitchen table like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. And that's when she told me the truth. She didn't die in that accident. Dad made it up. My whole world tilted. I told her that wasn't possible. There was a funeral. There was a casket. And nodded, eyes full of tears, and said Dad paid the funeral director. The casket was empty. Mom didn't die, she whispered. She left. For someone else. Dad couldn't handle it. He thought it was better if we believed she died. My heart physically hurt. I couldn't breathe. I walked out of the house without another word and just drove, nowhere in mind, just trying to stay conscious through the shock. Somehow, I ended up at Dad's place. He opened the door and took one look at me. He didn't even ask why I was there. He just sighed and said, and told you. I asked how he could lie, how he could do something like that to his own children. He invited me in and sat across from me like he knew this day would come eventually. He said Mom abandoned us for another man. He said he didn't want us to grow up hating her or thinking we weren't enough. He said pretending she was gone would hurt less than knowing she chose to walk away. I stayed there for hours. Asking every question I could think of. About Mom. About their marriage. About the lie that shaped my entire childhood. By the time the sun started setting, my brain felt numb. I couldn't process anymore. I told Dad I needed time alone and left. I didn't even know where I was driving until I realized I'd pulled into the supermarket. The same one from before. I wandered the aisles, barely noticing what I grabbed. My head was spinning. Then I turned into the dairy aisle and froze. There was a woman standing by the yogurt. Older now. Different haircut. But I would know those eyes anywhere. My mother. Alive. Right in front of me. So, remember how I posted that my mom, who I literally thought was dead for over a decade, is actually alive? Yeah. My inbox exploded. People telling me to get a lawyer, check my birth certificate, run, call the FBI. The internet really does not ease you gently into trauma. But nothing prepared me for what happened next. In that dairy aisle, she noticed me at the exact same second I noticed her. Her hand stopped mid-reach, fingers resting on a tub of Greek yogurt. We just froze, 10 solid seconds of silent, stunned eye contact. It felt like the whole supermarket fell away. No carts. No chatter. No humming refrigerators. Just the woman who gave birth to me, breathing the same air. Then she set down the yogurt, lifted her purse strap onto her shoulder, and started walking away. So I went after her. Not like some horror movie stalker, we're talking an actual jog because my legs had turned into jelly. I called out, "Mom," and she stopped. But she didn't turn around until I got closer. Her shoulders were trembling. When she finally faced me, it was like looking at a future version of myself. Same green eyes. Same nose, a little crooked at the bridge. More wrinkles now, more tired lines around her mouth. Seeing her in real life, older and breathing, was like being punched in the chest by a ghost. She asked how I was doing. And I laughed. Like, an ugly, hysterical laugh that made nearby shoppers side-eye us like we were about to get into a public brawl. "I'm doing great," I said. "Just found out my dead mother isn't dead. So, yeah, absolutely fantastic." She flinched like I'd slapped her. She asked if we could talk somewhere private. And for 1 second, I considered telling her to go to hell. I wanted her to feel what abandonment tasted like. But I needed answers more than revenge. We drove to one of those 24-hour diners, the kind with sticky tables and laminated menus that have probably been wiping down the same coffee stains since 1995. The waitress called everyone honey and could smell emotional damage from 5 feet away. We sat in a booth at the back. She ordered a coffee. I ordered a Coke because this was not a cozy mother-daughter catch-up session. She started talking, something about not knowing I'd be at the wedding, and I cut her off. "And invited you," I said. She nodded, eyes down. She told me Troy's mother sent the invitation to her current address, like she had just been living her normal life somewhere, not in a grave. She said she debated for weeks before deciding to go. "Where's your current address?" I asked. "Harrisburg." Harrisburg. An hour and a half away. For 13 years, she'd been a 90-minute drive from us. Close enough to show up to holidays, birthdays, graduations. But she didn't. She said she understood I was angry. And I told her, very clearly, that she didn't understand. I told her I cried myself to sleep for 2 years thinking she died in a twisted mess of metal. I told her I kept her picture under my pillow until I was 15. I told her I had nightmares about car crashes so bad Dad put me in therapy. That broke her. Tears, shaking hands, runny mascara, this was not pretty crying. The waitress dropped off our drinks and backed away like we were a live grenade. My mother said she never wanted this. That leaving was supposed to be temporary. She said Dad was controlling. That she felt smothered. That she needed space to figure out who she was. "So you left your children?" I asked. She said she planned to come back for us. 6 months. That's what she aimed for. But Dad told her if she ever tried to contact us, he would turn us against her. He'd say she left for drugs, for money, for another man. He would make sure we hated her. "So you just believed him?" I asked. "You just gave up?" She swore she didn't give up. She said she kept track of us through mutual friends. Through the internet. She pulled out her phone and showed me pictures. Screenshots from Facebook. Instagram. Ann's public posts. Thousands of photos, saved like trophies. Or evidence. Or a pathetic scrapbook of a life she wasn't part of. And somehow, that made me even angrier. Then I asked about the man Dad said she left for. Her whole face changed. Her voice went flat. Quiet. There was someone. Timothy. A coworker. An affair. So Dad hadn't lied about everything. She told me Timothy didn't last. It ended less than a year after she left. She said she was stupid. Selfish. Young. She was 32. That's not young. That's old enough to know abandoning your kids might ruin them. But the worst part? She said she tried to reach out once, when I was 16. She mailed a letter to our house, and Dad sent it back unopened. She tried calling, and he hung up the second he recognized her voice. She even drove past my high school once. Saw me laughing with my friends and decided I looked okay without her. "You don't get to make that decision," I told her. "You don't get to look at me for 2 seconds from your car and decide whether your kid needs you." She didn't argue. She just said she was a coward. That seeing and walk down the aisle, seeing me in those wedding photos online, something broke in her. She finally understood what she'd missed. I asked if she had other kids now. No. Married? No. What had she been doing for 13 years? Working as a secretary, she said. Living alone in a 1-bedroom apartment. Regretting every single day of my pathetic life. And the way she said pathetic? I actually believed her. I just didn't know if regret was enough. We stayed in that booth for what felt like forever. 2 hours, maybe more. She told me everything, the tiny, boring details of her life in Harrisburg. Her job. Her little apartment. Her cat named Button. How she volunteers at a food bank on Saturdays like that somehow fills the crater she left in my childhood. Every word was like she was trying to convince me she'd been living some wholesome Hallmark movie life, not hiding from her kids. At some point, I asked if I knew she was alive before the wedding. That's when everything cracked. My mother hesitated just long enough to answer without speaking. And then she admitted it, and had reached out to her 3 years ago. 3 years. I stood up so fast my Coke tipped over and spilled across the table. The waitress rushed over with napkins, but I was already walking away. I dropped cash on the table and headed for the door. Mom called my name, voice shaking, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I drove straight to Ann's place. It was 10 at night, raining, and I didn't care. I banged on her door like the building was on fire. She opened it, sleepy and confused, but the second she saw my face, she knew why I was there. She didn't deny it. She didn't even try. She said Mom found her on Facebook. That she was terrified, overwhelmed, confused. That she didn't know how to tell me. She said she wanted to protect me from being hurt again. Protect me? Is that what you call lying to my face for 3 years? And kept saying Mom begged her not to tell me until she was ready. Ready for what, exactly? Ready to show up when she felt like it? Ready to play Mother of the Year after hiding for over a decade, then and dropped something else. Mom had been asking about me constantly. My job. My life. Whether I was happy. And had been giving her updates like some secret informant. Meanwhile, every time I cried about missing Mom, every time I wondered what she'd think of my life now, and just smiled and nodded like she wasn't sitting on the world's biggest betrayal. I told her that wasn't kindness. It was cruel. She grabbed my arm, desperate, and said I didn't understand. She said Mom was fragile. She'd been in therapy. She'd tried to take her own life, twice. And then was terrified that if I rejected her, Mom might do it again. So what? I was supposed to go on a fake happy reunion tour to keep her alive? Emotional hostage situation, party of one. I told her I needed space. And I left. When I got home, I had a text from Nathaniel, the ex who started this whole unraveling by telling me what he'd seen at the wedding. He'd heard I'd been asking questions and wanted to know if I was okay. I called him. Not because we're close. But because, in that moment, he was literally the only person who hadn't lied to me. He answered immediately. I asked him to tell me again, every detail of what he saw at the wedding. He said he was sitting at table 12 with Eugene when he noticed a woman who looked familiar. At first he thought she might be someone from college. But then he remembered the pictures I'd had in my dorm. Old photos of Mom holding me as a baby, smiling that soft, shy, sad smile. And the woman at table 8 had that same smile. He mentioned it to Eugene, who casually told him that was Sheila. Troy's mom had invited her because they'd been friends years ago. Eugene didn't even realize the significance until Nathaniel explained. I asked him why he waited so long to tell me. He said he didn't. He tried to bring it up the week after the wedding, but I was distant. We were already falling apart. Then, 2 months later, we broke up, and he figured his window had closed. Which, honestly, was fair. He asked how my talk with her went. I told him I had no clue. Part of me wants her to disappear again. Part of me wants 1,000 answers. He told me that was normal. He said he'd be around if I needed someone to talk to. No drama. No guilt. Just simple, decent honesty. I'd forgotten what that felt like. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from Ann and 1 voicemail from Dad telling me to call him immediately. I called Dad first. He asked if I'd seen her. I said yes. There was a long silence. Then he said something that blindsided me. After 13 years, Mom called him. Last night. She told him she wanted back into our lives. She wanted a relationship with her daughters. With him. She wanted to fix what she broke. And Dad told her no. He said she could see and if and wanted, but she needed to stay away from me. That I was doing fine. That she'd caused enough damage. I asked him who made him the decision maker of my entire emotional life. He didn't answer. He just said he was protecting me. Like he always had. And that's when I realized something awful. Every person in this situation thinks they get to decide for me. Dad. Ann. Mom. Like I'm a child stuck in the middle of their choices. But nobody has asked me what I want. I hung up on Dad. And here's something I haven't told anyone yet. When I left the diner last night, I saw someone standing near the parking lot. Leaning against a silver car. Watching the entrance. Blue jacket guy. The one from Costco. The one the old lady warned me about. When I drove past, I got a clear look at his face. He looked exactly like my mother. And that is when everything stopped being just emotional chaos? And started feeling like something else entirely. The comments on my last post were chaos. Half of you were convinced Blue Jacket Guy was a private investigator hired by someone. The other half thought I was one breakdown away from my own true crime Netflix special. So the next morning, I called my mother and said we needed to talk. Immediately. She asked if she could bring someone. At that point, everything in my life was already insane, so I said, sure. Whatever. Bring the entire circus. An hour later, there was a knock at my door. I opened it, and nearly forgot how to breathe. A teenage boy stood next to my mother. Tall, thin, nervous enough that his hands wouldn't stop fidgeting. Hi, he said, voice shaking. Sorry for being a creep. My brain short-circuited for a second. He looked familiar but I couldn't place him. He continued talking, words tumbling out like he'd been practicing. He told me he'd been trying to introduce himself for weeks, but every time he saw me, he panicked. Costco was the day he finally worked up the nerve. And then that older woman basically called him out as a stalker. He got spooked, and ran. I looked at my mom and said, explain. Now. And she did. 2 years after she left us, she had a son. Sydney. His father, some guy named Ronald, left when Sydney was a baby. So she raised him alone. In Harrisburg. An hour and a half away. All those years. As she talked, I watched Sydney's face. He didn't look smug or guilty or happy about any of it. He looked like a kid who didn't know where to stand in his own life. So I asked him, "What do you want out of this?" He swallowed hard, then said the sentence that punched me right in the chest. "I just wanted to know my sisters." He told us he grew up seeing pictures of us. Hearing stories. Knowing we existed, but never being allowed to meet us. He said it was like having ghost siblings. And suddenly, everything inside me cracked. Because I grew up with a ghost mother. And it sucked. I called in and told her she needed to get to my apartment right now. 20 minutes later, she walked through the door, and froze. Then her jaw dropped. "Holy," she whispered. "We have a brother." Sydney laughed nervously. "Yeah. Surprise." And immediately turned into the most chaotic version of herself, full interrogation mode. "Where do you go to school? What grade are you in? Sports? Hobbies? Favorite classes? Are you allergic to anything?" Sydney told us he was in 10th grade. Loved video games. Liked basketball. Hated geometry. Just a kid. Our brother. We ordered Chinese food and sat on the living room floor, eating lo mein straight from the carton while asking him every question that came to mind. Our mother barely spoke, just watched the three of us with this look, like she'd been starving and was finally seeing food. At one point, I saw tears running down her face. Silent. Constant. She wiped them quickly, whispered sorry, and kept listening. And asked why she came to the wedding, knowing she might be seen. Mom said she'd debated for months. That Troy's mother invited her. That she just wanted to see us as adults, even if it was from across a crowded room. She swore she planned to stay hidden. But Nathaniel recognized her. I asked Sydney if he'd always known about us. He nodded. He'd always known he had two older sisters he couldn't meet. He said he used to ask why, and she'd say it was complicated. That she'd made mistakes she couldn't undo. And asked if Mom was a good mom to him. Sydney went quiet. Really quiet. Then he said, softly, she tried her best. But she was sad a lot. Some days, she couldn't get out of bed. She worked all the time, but emotionally, she was somewhere else. Mom broke. Not loud, dramatic sobbing, just this quiet shaking that made and get up and wrap her arms around her. And whispered, "We can't change the past. But maybe we can figure out the future." I didn't join the hug. Not yet. But something inside me shifted, just a little. Because Sydney wasn't the reason she left us. He was another kid who got the broken version of our mother. And he deserved better, too. Over the next few weeks, Sydney became part of our world. Mom drove him down on weekends. We went to a Phillies game. Tried an escape room. Ate too much junk food and made fun of bad horror movies. It was weird. And good. And painful. And healing. Somehow, all at once. Mom came sometimes too. Those days were awkward at first. We didn't know how to act around her. Was she a guest? A parent? A stranger? But slowly, painfully, we got to know her for real, who she was now, not the ghost we'd invented. She told us about her secretary job. Her cat, Button. Her volunteering at the food bank because helping people made her feel less guilty about breathing. And eventually asked about Dad, and this time, Mom didn't hide. She said Dad used to track her spending. Wanted to know where she was at all times. Who she talked to. Why she was late. Who called her. She said she felt like she was suffocating inside her own marriage. It didn't excuse her leaving. But it made the picture clearer. We were raised inside a lie. But the truth wasn't clean, either. It was jagged and ugly and complicated. And for the first time, it wasn't just about what Mom did. It was about everything that led her to do it. She told us the whole truth, ugly, uncomfortable, complicated. She'd met Timothy at work. He made her feel seen again, appreciated, alive. So yes, she had an affair. And when Dad found out, everything detonated. Words were said that couldn't be unsaid, doors were slammed, and she left, telling herself she just needed space. A week, maybe 2. Time to think. Time to breathe. But Dad didn't do space. He told her if she walked out that door, she was done. No middle ground. No separation. No co-parenting. Out meant out. She panicked and ran. By the time her head stopped spinning and she realized what she'd done, Dad had already told us she was dead. Not gone. Not missing. Dead. Funeral, casket, flowers, the whole thing. And when she tried to call, he told her he'd make us hate her forever if she came near us again. I asked her why she believed him. Why she didn't fight. Why she didn't scream. Why she didn't kick down every door until she reached us. She said she was ashamed. She said Dad's anger terrified her. She said part of her believed we would be better without her. So she hid. Then Sydney spoke up, quietly, carefully. He said he'd found letters. Hundreds of them. Birthday cards. Christmas cards. Back-to-school cards. Letters about her life, her job, us, memories she hoped we still had. She wrote everything she couldn't say. Then sealed each envelope and put them in a box. Never mailed. Just stored in her closet like a museum of regret. One Saturday, she brought the box to Anne's apartment. Inside were 13 years of words we never got to read. Little gifts, tiny toys, handwritten cards addressed to my baby girls, photos she'd collected of us through mutual friends, printouts from Facebook and Instagram. I didn't even realize I was crying until the pages got wet. There was a letter for my 16th birthday. She wrote that she drove past my school that day, saw me laughing with friends, and convinced herself I was okay. That maybe staying away was the right choice. But I wasn't okay. I had spent years pretending to be fine, smiling when I was cracking, taking care of other people so I didn't have to feel what was missing. I was still 12 inside, still the child who lost her mother overnight. And I decided we needed to talk to Dad, not to defend Mom, not to pick sides, but to show him we were adults now. We understood things differently. We invited him to dinner at N's place. He walked in and saw Mom sitting there, and froze. And spoke first. "We asked you here to talk. All of us." Dad sat down stiffly, like every muscle in his body was trying not to shake. I told him we'd been spending time with Mom and Sydney. That we weren't excusing her choices, but we were starting to understand them. Dad didn't want to hear it. He said there was nothing to understand, she abandoned her family. Mom said she'd left a toxic marriage and been threatened into staying away. Dad said that was complete garbage, that the only thing he'd threatened was the truth. Sydney looked Dad in the eyes and asked, "What truth?" Dad told him point blank. "Your mother cheated on us. She chose another man over her family." Mom didn't deny it. She nodded and said she made a terrible mistake, but she'd wanted to fix it. Dad, she said, had given her an ultimatum, stay under his conditions or leave for good. Dad snapped back that she was rewriting history. That she walked out. That she didn't care enough to look back. They went back and forth until Anne finally slammed her hand on the table and yelled at both of them to stop. She said none of us could change what happened 13 years ago. The only thing that mattered now was what we did next. I told Dad I loved him. That he'd raised us, protected us, sacrificed for us. But I also told him his lie about Mom being dead nearly ruined me. I needed him to respect that Mom was part of my life again. He stared at me for a long time. Then he asked if that was really what I wanted. I said yes. And said yes. Dad swallowed hard and asked about Sydney. I told him Sydney is our brother and we want him in our lives. Dad nodded slowly. Said he would try. Said he'd respect our choices. But he also said he didn't want to pretend everything was fine. He wasn't ready to share meals or birthdays or smiles. And as much as it hurt, I got it. Some scars are deeper than apologies. Over the next 2 months, a strange new normal formed. Mom and Sydney drove down on weekends. Sometimes they stayed in a cheap hotel nearby so Sydney wouldn't miss school. Sunday dinners became tradition. Sometimes at Anne's place. Sometimes at mine. Sometimes at a little diner halfway between Philly and Harrisburg where the waitress memorized our orders. We talked. We cried. We argued. We laughed. Mom told us about her childhood. Her parents. Her dreams before life swallowed them. Sydney told us about Harrisburg, his friends, the way he learned to cook because Mom worked late shifts. And told stories about trying to be my second mother at age 15. I told them about the nightmares that wouldn't stop. How I avoided loving people because losing Mom had carved terror into my bones. One Sunday, Mom brought a photo album. Baby pictures. Family vacations. Photos of us at the beach, Dad smiling, Mom holding me, and building a sandcastle. Sydney stared at those pictures like they were photos of a family he'd only heard rumors about. Mom said that beach day was the last time she remembered being truly happy with Dad. And asked if she ever missed him. Mom said she missed the version of him who loved her. Not the version who controlled her. Not the version who used fear as a leash. It was the first time I understood their marriage wasn't black and white. There had been love once. And then it died. 3 months after meeting Sydney, Mom asked if she could meet Nathaniel. She said if he hadn't recognized her at the wedding, none of this would have happened. She wanted to thank him. So we arranged lunch in Center City. Me, Nathaniel, Mom, Anne, and Sydney. Mom thanked him for speaking up. Said she had been terrified when he recognized her. But she was grateful. Nathaniel said he always felt guilty for not saying something sooner. I told him everything happened when it was supposed to. It felt like closure. Then Anne pulled me aside. She looked nervous, excited, reckless, all at the same time. She said she wanted to try something. Something bold. Something terrifying. She wanted to invite Mom and Dad to the same place. Same table. Same conversation. See if civility was possible. I told her it was the worst idea she'd ever had. But Anne is Anne. And once she decides something? It's already happening. We decided on neutral ground, a family barbecue at a public park near Anne's place. Not a dinner in someone's home. Not a private conversation. A picnic table, sunshine, and strangers everywhere, basically, the safest arena for 2 people with 13 years of emotional shrapnel between them. We invited everyone. Dad, Mom, Sydney, Troy, and, yes, Nathaniel, because if it weren't for him, none of this would have unraveled. The morning of the barbecue, my nerves were so bad I almost canceled. I kept pacing around my kitchen, imagining Dad storming off or Mom crying or Sydney stuck between them like a scared puppy. Then my phone buzzed. Sydney, we can do this. It's time. That kid has more courage in his pinky finger than most adults I know. Dad arrived first, arms crossed, posture tight, clearly wondering why he agreed to this. A few minutes later, Mom walked up with Sydney. Dad saw her. Mom saw him. And for a full, heavy minute, they just stood there across the picnic tables, breathing the same air for the first time in over a decade. Then Dad walked toward her. Not fast. Not slow. Just steady. He didn't hug her. Didn't shake her hand. Didn't smile. But he said hello. And asked how she'd been. Mom said she was okay. Asked how he was. He said retirement wasn't so bad. It was stiff and weird and awkward, but it was civil. And honestly, that felt like a miracle. We grilled burgers. Hot dogs. A mountain of chips. Sydney challenged Dad to horseshoes, and Dad actually, genuinely, smiled. At one point, I saw Dad and Mom standing near the grill having a quiet conversation. No raised voices. No bitterness. Just 2 people who used to love each other, talking like humans again. When I walked over, Dad was telling her about his new hobby, woodworking. Mom said she'd always wanted to learn. Dad shrugged and said maybe Sydney could help him in the workshop sometime. That kind of stuff is good for kids, he said. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a start. When the sun dipped low and the sky turned gold, we all sat around the picnic table eating watermelon. The air felt lighter than it had in a long time. And said we should do this again, regularly. Bigger gatherings, not just Sunday dinners. Everyone agreed. Even Dad nodded. Then Mom cleared her throat and said she wanted to speak. Her voice shook, but she didn't look away. She said she knew she'd hurt every single person at that table in different ways. She said she was sorry, deeply, painfully sorry, for leaving, for staying gone, for every birthday and holiday and milestone she'd missed. She said she couldn't repair the past, but she wanted to be part of our future, if we'd let her. Dad didn't give a dramatic speech. He didn't forgive her. He didn't pretend everything was magically fixed. He just said we'd all made mistakes. That life is too short to stay angry forever. And for the sake of his daughters, and for Sydney, who was just a kid caught in the wreckage, he would try. Mom cried again. But this time it was the kind of crying that sounds like breathing after being underwater too long. Last week was my birthday. And for the first time in 13 years, Mom was there. She brought a cake she baked herself, chocolate with raspberry filling, my favorite when I was little. She remembered. I started crying at the first bite. We took a family photo. Dad, Mom, Anne, Troy, Sydney, me. It was the first picture of all of us together since I was 12 years old. I printed it and put it on my fridge. Sometimes I stare at it and think, my mom was supposed to be dead. My brother wasn't supposed to exist. My family wasn't supposed to heal. But here we are. Learning. Breaking. Fixing. Trying. And I keep thinking about that elderly woman at Costco, the one who saw a nervous teenager trailing behind me and decided to say something. She had no idea what she was setting in motion. Because of her, I got my mother back. Because of her, I gained a brother. Because of her, my family, broken and messy and imperfect, is finding its way back together. And to everyone who read my posts, listened, commented, yelled advice into the internet void, thank you. Sometimes the world breaks us apart. Sometimes the world brings us back. And sometimes, it happens in the dairy aisle.